This sermon is kind of an extension of a sermon that I preached a while back on Mother's Day. Um, and also kind of connected to some frustrations that I have around statements that I've heard men say. Um, Particularly around the Me Too movement, a lot of men have came out and stated that they feel that their manhood is being attacked. And after me kind of working through my frustration and kind of anger about that statement, through some meditation and so forth, I realized that that's true in some ways. That manhood, the way that men typically understand manhood, is being attacked. And what that means is that there's something about that we must change, that we must learn to change and listen to the voices that are being lifted up around pain and suffering, and what ways can we grow from this experience. But that needs to happen. There needs to be some critique of the way in which men understand themselves and the way that they embody and move about in the world, and the way that that is connected to the suffering and pain of women. And also our LGBTQ family and beloveds. So this is where this sermon is springing from. And I entitled it, Her Freedom is Our Liberation. Cages, shackles, the separation of families, exclusion, oppression, the screams of mothers. Let's sit with that for a moment. The scream of a mother as her child is being stripped from her arms. How would you respond if someone took your children from your arms? Literally took them from your own arms. I can feel and hear the screams of mothers, and that is my starting point today for this sermon, to kind of sit with the reality that families are being stripped apart, and you can hear the screams of mothers or parents. As an African American, these monstrous practices upheld by our country are not new. In fact, my limited knowledge of my origins speaks to this reality. My last name, that was the name of a slaveholder in South Carolina, speaks to that practice, and it feels like a mother's scream is etched into my DNA somewhere. Even though I'm not quite sure of its origins, but it is there. The title of the sermon today is Her Freedom is Our Liberation. Her freedom is our liberation. One of the practices of Jesus that I believe is often ignored is his position or context. I fell in love with this man God for a particular reason. Jesus gave himself to a particular reality or life. If we lend ourselves to doctrine that states God came in the form of Jesus, God came in the world as Jesus, then it has to shift our engagement with Christianity as is. Let me say it this way. God came into the world as a brown-bodied Palestinian Jew conceived inside an unwed teenage mother without consent. Without consent. Who was homeless and poor. Now let's sit with that. Why would a God come in that way? And I have many problems with that, but I'm not going to unpack that right now. There is something in the text today that I find peculiar and important. We have a synagogue leader coming to Jesus for help with his sick daughter. These are the same leaders that have continually tried to silence Jesus. What Jesus says and does is where the power dwells. Jesus simply follows him to his daughter without question. The story shifts quickly into the story of a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and continued to get worse. This story sounds too familiar to me as a chaplain, and there are so many voices in my head of certain bodies being excluded within the healthcare system. The young black mother who can't have the tumor removed from her brain because she does not have medical insurance. The misdiagnosed Latina woman because the doctor never took the time to really hear her. The daughter who comes to the emergency room grasping for air, but the hospital is more concerned about payment. She eventually collapses on the floor. These are a few examples of the way certain kinds of bodies are missed, ignored, forgotten, and mistreated. The truth of this is that women carry the heaviest weight of the reality, of this reality. A male doctor telling the woman where she hurts, completely ignoring, as she has said over and over, that it hurts over here. If you confront this doctor, the doctor claims it's just a common mistake. When statistics show over and over that women are systematically mistreated, particularly women of color. The woman in the text, a woman of color, just wants to touch Jesus so that she can be healed. The people in her community ignore her as if she is not human. But she believes, she knows that Jesus will see her. How powerful it is to be seen. And she will be healed. There is something in her that knows that a connection with Jesus will heal her. When Jesus realized who touched him, he makes an interesting statement. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering. Your faith has healed you. There are many ways that this can be interpreted or unpacked. I just want to say that Jesus gives himself no credit. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. I recently met a powerful woman from Kenya named Karambu, who I developed a wonderful relationship with and now call Mama Karambu. She has developed and founded orphanages in Kenya for children who have lost their parents from AIDS. She makes an important distinction between empowerment and empoweredness. She says, and I quote, empowerment is what someone does for you. Empoweredness is what you do for yourself. Jesus seems to continually point to the power within others and not emphasizing himself. It seems to me that he believes it is the same power that we all are rooted and connected to. This is also the case when he raises the little girl up. Jesus even goes as far as to say that she was only asleep, and that no one should be told that she was raised from the dead. I say all of this for an important reason. In this text, Jesus gives his privileged power. Jesus gives his privileged power to those who need it most. So he literally, willingly gives his power, and acknowledges their interconnected power, which in turn centers their reality. If justice, love, healing, reconciliation, freedom are legitimate conversations or pursuits, I think it's shown in this text that these places where Jesus centers his ministry, his power, is where we must try to start. In this text, right there are the intersections of class, poverty, race, gender, sex, sexuality, colonialism, is where any conversations of justice must begin. This is why I titled the sermon for today, Her Freedom is Our Liberation, a kind of collective liberation. As a child, I would curl up in a corner of my room and listen to my father beat my mother until she couldn't scream anymore. in more subtle ways, I eventually became numb to the way that I myself became a reflection of my Father. How I became complicit in the practices of patriarchy and forms of oppression. I still have no idea how to reverse this socialization, so I'm not standing up here as if I have some kind of answer to the madness. But I know it has everything to do with facing the reality of women. Facing myself and everything that it means to truly look oneself in the mirror and fully acknowledging who I have become. To be in solidarity with women as they pursue a kind of freedom that, in many ways, I'm complicit in. Then maybe we can touch Jesus' cloak. Maybe we can all be healed. The truth is, for the majority of us, not all, I think, that our lives would have been would have far less love, joy, and comfort without the women in our lives. What would it mean to truly hear, listen, sit with, internalize the experiences of the women in our lives? Could it possibly be part of the healing process to heal our relationships? It was a group of powerful black women who surrounded me when violence almost consumed me in my own home. They buffered me from the racism that almost crushed me as I got older. I'm thinking a lot about the shift as I think about my relationship with my son and me as a parent when I went from being a cute child to a dangerous black boy. I tremble at the reality that Malik will feel this. I hope I can do what my mothers did for me. I hope I can learn from their practices to hold places of love and healing for people that often hurt them. I'm pretty convinced that our work in the church is not simply to see Jesus, the individual, in the writings of the disciples whose stuff reached the Bible. What would it mean to fully acknowledge the women who birthed him, them, or the women who loved him and them? How could it shift our understanding of our mission? I am convinced it will change the way we do ministry, the way that we do church, the way that we love ourselves. May the day come that we see that her freedom is our liberation.